here's what happened this morning. I wrote to my our manager, Melanie, and I'm like, hey, give me Father's phone number.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a phone.
Yeah.
Not he has a dumb phone. He doesn't
Right.
have a phone. That made me so happy. Please tell me what that's like, traveling and living.
And there's a nuance to it. Most of us have no phones at all. There are a few, especially kind of our higher up leadership, who have to have some sort of smartphone. For the last 5 or 6 years, I've run our media as well. So I run our communications and I run our whatever. And so I do actually have the use of an iPhone. But the balance of it is that I've chosen not to have a SIM card in it.
Yeah.
And so the big thing for that is we don't have the internet in our friary. And so I have it as a tool, like when I'm at a place where I'm working and things like that, and I can do what I need to do. But it also gives me the freedom when I'm in the friary, I'm actually in the friary and cut off. Or like when I'm here and I'm traveling, it kind of allows me to do my job, but also be authentic to the Franciscan vocation. Yeah.
I was just in Assisi
All right.
like 2 months ago.
Yeah, I've never been. How was it?
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I went in the year 2000. That was my conversion year. It was a pretty radical change in my life. That was during World Youth Day. It was like a extension to the pilgrimage. But I didn't remember it. You know, it's been 24 years. And so my wife and I just spent the last 6 months in Austria, and we were traveling to different countries every weekend for the last 3 of those 6 months. Yeah, so we decided to take the family to Assisi, and it is really cool. Beautiful.
Yeah, I've heard it's one of the most like peaceful places in the world.
People kept saying that, and I kept being like, yeah, shut up. People just say that. I don't know, but it was really, they were right.
Okay, it did hold up.
It was
okay.
awesome.
Yeah.
But it was funny because we rented an Airbnb from a fella who was raised in Assisi, and it was really interesting to get his take on Assisi. He called it medieval Disneyland. Like, it's not, there's a reason this looks like a medieval town, and it's for tourism.
Yeah.
And that hurt my heart a little bit, but I get it.
Yeah, because I think my understanding is, I don't know who's in charge of the things. They're just super strict about building and changes and things like that to preserve it, right?
Yeah, and I think there's only a couple of thousand who live within the walls. But it was bigger than I remembered, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
But, okay, so this must be the perpetual problem that all Franciscans deal with, namely poverty, right? Because I'm hanging out there, I'm seeing a bunch of Franciscans with their really nice cameras and their phones, and I'm just like, I don't know how you come. I'm not judging them. I'm just, if I was in their sandals,
Yeah.
I don't know how I would go there and not just think I was the world's biggest fraud when you're confronted with exactly how Francis lived.
Yeah. And to be honest, like, you don't have to go to Assisi to get confronted with Francis in that way. And that's kind of the ongoing, I think you learn to do it, but how do you look in the mirror of St. Francis and then you see yourself, and it's just,
I'm horrible.
kind of, you know, and it's like, I just am not that at all. And I think, to be honest, that's probably something that all of us in different ways you have to like sort of process and come to some sort of understanding of how I can be a follower of him, but still so far behind. We have a prayer we say after Mass called the Companions of St. Francis. And it'll be, if I said the whole thing, I would know it, but just like we have this line about like, we're following you, though from so great a distance.
You can say the whole thing if you remember it.
Draw us to yourself, most worthy Father Francis, that we may run after your fragrance of holiness. As you know, we are lukewarm because of our sloth, languid because of our idleness, half alive because of our negligence. This little flock is following you with hesitant steps. Our weak eyes cannot bear the dazzling rays of your perfection. Renew our hearts as from the beginning. Renew our steps as from the beginning, O mirror and model of holiness. Holy Father, a mirror and model of holiness. That's what I can remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I literally say it.
It's like
after
the
Mass
creed. It
every
helps
day.
when people around you are saying it as well.
Yeah. And probably if I wasn't, I was like processing it in a new way while doing it.
Oh, yeah.
But that is a funny thing about, I literally have said it every day for the last 15 years, but now on the spot, you can't remember the whole thing. But anyway, that whole thing about we're following you with hesitant steps from so great a distance. And so there is, but also the understanding is like what made Francis was the work of God. And in a certain sense, if God wanted to make me St. Francis, he could in the same way, but he has chosen not to do that in the same way.
Yeah.
And so there is just, even like there's a holy looking at the saints for like inspiration and encouragement and admonition even. But then there's also a way in which you say, but yeah, like I'm following him, but the Lord is making me a Franciscan in a particular and unique way, and that's okay.
What's weird about Francis, and you correct me because you clearly know way more than me. is that he was what they would call in the East a holy fool, it seems.
Yeah.
I don't know if he lives so radically and almost like irresponsibly, at least from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah.
It's so weird to have someone like that lead a religious order, found a religious order, and then also he's kind of like a Christ-like figure. I don't know anyone that talks about their founder. I mean, even in that little prayer there, it sounds like you're talking about Jesus. Like you're calling yourself the little flock, mirror of holiness. Like people, he really seems to be like another Christ. I know that's not what he was, but in a way, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm glad you noticed that, and I was going to comment it on because I'm sure some of your listeners or viewers noticed it too, is like some other religions sort of make fun of us for how highly we speak of St. Francis in that prayer.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, like...
just easy.
Relax a little bit. But we do... What would be different, for example, in the relationship that we have to our founder than Benedictines to St. Benedict and Dominicans to St. Dominic, etc., is we refer to St. Francis as the forma vitae, as like the way of life. And so for many of them, it's like for the Benedictines, it's the rule. For Dominicans, that would be hard. I think the Dominican focuses more on like sort of like maybe the theology, and even Aquinas overshadows Dominic in some ways, you know. Yeah. But for us, it's like the most important thing that St. Francis gave us isn't just the rule or writings or anything like that, theology. It's actually how he lived. And so that's kind of like we hold him in a kind of a privileged, unique way that's different from maybe other.
This is what one Dominican once said to me. This is why there are so many Franciscan orders. He said, we follow the rule of St. Dominic, they follow the person of St. Francis. Yeah. And a person is a lot more interpretable than a document.
Right. And that's, I don't know the answer to this, like how, there's just not, from my understanding, I don't know if there's any like official Benedictine reforms in the proper sense, or in the same sense that there's different Franciscans, or I know there's
I guess the
monastic
Carmelites
communities.
had a reform with Teresa and John, but
they kind of, and even that, so maybe that's like one or two, and Dominicans are still, the Dominicans and all that sort of stuff. Like why have there been so many different Franciscan orders and renewals and breaks? And I think part of it is that there is a sense in which, if you will, there is that sort of you can do many things in a Franciscan way. And so that kind of makes sense. Like
what does that mean?
Meaning, you can have a Franciscan spirituality and be a college professor. Like you can still live simply, you can still lean into dependence. Or you can be a Franciscan and teach, or you can be a Franciscan and work at a hospital. Or you can be a Franciscan and even be like a pastor, whatever. Like for our order, for example, like we're not going to be college professors. Not because we don't have guys who are smart enough or inclined that way. That's just not what we feel God has called us to do. And
the CFRs specifically?
The CFRs, yeah. And so, and we're not going to, for example, kind of a controversial thing in our constitutions is that we by rule do not run parishes. So we won't be pastors. And part of it is to protect our fraternal life, our life of poverty, to make sure that we're free and close to the poor. But you can still do that in an authentically Franciscan way, but we haven't feel that's what God's called us to. But what I think part of it is how human nature works, is that particularly towards poverty, there's always the idea, there's like a joke that when you become a Franciscan, you give up everything and then you spend the rest of your religious life taking it back. And that's something that you have to be really careful of. And I think that happens for individuals, but also it can happen for orders corporately. And there's a part where you've just kind of got comfortable and you've got reattached, and you kind of have to just break and begin again. Like, I don't know if that's one of the reasons why, because we have this whole high ideal, particularly towards poverty, that might be part of why Franciscans particularly have to kind of like break and renew again.
This kind of, I can only analogize this to marriage, right? Because I'm a married man, but it reminds me of the compromises that married couples end up making. And, maybe the way they speak to their spouse, or the way they, maybe they're not as beautiful towards them as they were during the courting period. And then they seek to justify this new way of living as what's realistic. And there might be, some of that might be true, like when my wife touches my arm and asks me to take out the trash, I don't swoon. I don't think I ever did, but
sure,
it's not, things are different. So it's like trying to decide, okay, how much of this is compromising and how much should I be striving for that first, that ideal of what marriage is supposed to be, and it's so easy to kind of become embittered and then just to sort of justify bad habits. And I'm sure that's true in the priesthood. Like you've got to, because I'm sure as a young man entering the Franciscans, I would have been super zealous for
Yes.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I would have judged everybody.
Yeah.
And then I would have realized that I need gas in this car or I need something. And yeah.
Yeah, and I work in formation. So currently right now I live in Yonkers, New York, where I am the director of priestly studies for our guys. So I'm in charge of our seminarians and then spiritual direction for the Dawson guys. But the 3 years previously, I lived in our postulancy house, which is where postulancy is the first step on the journey of entering us. And that's about a 10 or 11 month process. But seeing in them, but also seeing my own life, this is just a super common movement. You come in super zealous, also idealistic, also a little bit unrealistic, you know? And so you have these ideas of this is what it's all going to look like, and it's all going to be pretty, and it's all going to be whatever. And then you make vows and you go into life and you start to see these guys and like, okay, this isn't what it was in postulancy, and this isn't what it was in novitiate. Like, should I be concerned? Should I be scared? And I think the one of the things I talk to our guys is I use this analogy of, I don't know the specific like a rocket ship. When a rocket ship's going up, it has like these boosters and it has these sort of like extra engines which help get it into orbit, but eventually they drop off.
Right.
That as a young man, you have a lot of these sort of like these like boosters that need to be purified and that eventually fall away. And so there's a lot of motivation even for, I want to like be a really good brother, and I want to make everybody proud, or I want to win the affection of my brothers. And so like there's this
and what's the thing is that should be there. In the Brothers Karamazov, the author talks about Alyosha this way. And he says something to the effect, I'm going off memory, but you shouldn't trust a young man who isn't idealistic and who isn't overly enthused about.
So I definitely think like you want that, and then you help temper and form it.
I want to tell you about Hallow, which is the #1 downloaded prayer app in the world. It's outstanding. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. Sign up over there right now and you will get the first 3 months for free. That's like a lot of time. You can decide whether it's useful to you or not, whether it's helpful. If you don't like it, you can always quit. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. I use it. My family uses it. It's fantastic. There are over 10,000 audio guided prayers, meditations, and music, including my lo-fi. Hallow has been downloaded over 15 million times in 150 different countries. It helps you pray, helps you meditate, helps you sleep better. It helps you build a daily routine and a habit of prayer. There's honestly so much excellent stuff on this app that it's difficult to get through it all. Just go check it out. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. The link is in the description below. It even has an entire section for kids. So if you're a parent, you could play little Bible stories to them at night. It'll help them pray. Fantastic. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd.